Hello there, healthcare humans. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of The Other Human in the Room. Okay, so I thought it would be fun to do an episode that's like another little check-in, giving an update on a very specific project that I've been working on in my own life over the past many months, especially since it's really actually been about a year since I've started doing some version of this project. So if you've listened to more than one podcast, you may have heard me talk about how this past year I have been actively trying, well, no, I've been actively creating a life, a schedule, a workflow that's aiming to be about 75% of my max capacity, like physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Specifically, if you go back and listen to episode, I think it's like 90 or 91, there's one that's about like creating surge capacity where I talk about this specifically. But really, I started this work back about a year ago, actually. It's sometime around here was the year anniversary of my husband being diagnosed with cancer. He is fine now, but for a period of several months over the spring and winter, like in 2023, I had this realization of like, oh my gosh, like right now my life is full and it's full to the brim and I can do it. I can work at my capacity. That's what I can do. But then something like a serious diagnosis came along in my family, and I realized I have no space for when life doesn't go as planned. And in that process, I said, okay, I have to actually plan less than is technically possible for me to do in a given day, in a given week. I have to commit to less than I technically could. Because, first of all, it allows me space to be a human. It allows me space to discover what can happen if I don't plan every single waking moment of my day. What an interesting project. What an interesting project to consider, right? And also, when other things like come up, as they will, whether it's like a serious diagnosis, whether it's myself or one of my kids like catching a cold, literally in my clinic schedule, what if I had space? So if I have to cancel the clinic, there's some space for at least some of those patients to still be seen, for them to flow either to someone else or to me on like a white space I have now. What if I actually had time to not cram in a home visit, but just had space that I could use for a home visit on a regular basis, just speaking of clinical work? And, what if I had space to go have tea with a friend on a regular basis during work hours? What if I had evenings for myself and could use it sometimes for pleasure, sometimes for creative pursuits, sometimes for podcast recordings, whatever. But like, what if there was space for flow? And what would that do? What would that feel like? And I just wanted to give you an update on specifically how that feels. And in part because it's fun to give an update just for myself. Like, as I say at the beginning of this podcast, if for no one else is listening, I would still do this podcast because it's for me. I'm finding it such a lovely way to really follow through on the things that I dream about, because look, I said them out loud. So what if I apply them to my own life? And it's becoming a bit of like, timestamp of like, just life and the different places I'm at as I, journey through this life. It's a kind of a journal of how I'm shifting and changing over time. So I'm recording this for me. I'm also recording this for you. And specifically, I'll talk a little bit more at the end of the podcast, but I'm going to be hosting my first completely free online virtual workshop next week. If you're listening to this the week that the podcast comes out, this podcast is going to come out at the end of February, and I'm hosting a completely free Zoom workshop next Wednesday, March 6th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And the name of that podcast is Capacity Checkup. I thought it was cute. Checkup, medical, right? That's fun. And because I've been talking about this idea a lot, and I know like some of you who are my coaching clients or friends or people who listen to the podcast have heard me talk about this concept. Maybe you've even I've done a couple workshops about scheduling your time and your life around your human capacity, which have been so fun. And I just was amazed at the response from them. And I've been really inspired by how much this idea of like imagining and considering your body's capacity and using that as a framework to through which to let things go and to prioritize and to pare down to like what feels good, you know. And I wanted to do a checkup. So even if you've been to one of those workshops before, or if you've been my client and we've talked about this before, this is like for you would be a bit of a refresher workshop of like, well, how are we now? What's the checkup for right now? Also, if you've never been to any of my workshops before, if you've never talked to me ever, if you've never actually interacted with me, you've only listened to the podcast, this is an opportunity for you to do a checkup. I'm still going to review the core concepts, and we're going to go through sort of the main prioritization exercise I find helpful. And in doing so, my hope is that everyone who comes to the workshop or listens afterwards, if you don't happen to be available on March 6th, you can listen to the recording. And my hope is that you will find some good, tangible ways to start paring back and subtracting a little bit and really just allowing there to be a bit more space in your life and just even considering that to be possible for yourself. I said I would wait till the end to tell you more about it, and I just told you a bunch about it. I am going to talk a little bit more in detail about it at the end, but there you go. There's the plug right up top is you're invited to do your own capacity checkup. And I'm just doing one for myself here as an example. So as I give the examples of how I have created space in my life and intentionally working and scheduling and planning under my capacity, I know we have a tendency to do kind of this terminology I've heard from a certain coaching community of compare and despair, where you're like, oh my gosh, Joan's doing all that. I'm not doing any of that, or it's hopeless for me, or I don't even want to do it like that. And I would actually invite you to allow all those reactions to come up, because when we compare, a little bit what we're doing is reflecting on our own life. When it comes to like any kind of shame stories of like, that means there's something bad about me or something bad about you, I invite you to allow those to sit in the corner and not drive the bus and be like, okay, you can sit at the back of the bus, but you're not actually going to be dominating this conversation. Because really, my hope is that you mainly hear from what I share that it's possible, that you consider and have curiosity about how it could be possible for you and what you want to be possible for you. Because, you know, when I describe what I've created and what that leaves me space for, you might be like, that's not for me, but I would really love if I had time for X. And that's the whole purpose of me sharing my story, is for you to know that it's humanly possible, but then also like consider what would be humanly possible for you. Okay. So yes. So just to say, so what I have done, so a year ago, I'd actually done a lot of prioritization already, but I still was, you know, my calendar was very full. I was definitely working more clinically than I am now. If I even zoom back like a few years ago, like when I first started practicing family medicine, I had, I think, 8 half days of clinic, like seeing patients per week. And so that's been a shift just over time of paring back with that. And so now, first I'll just describe like kind of what it looks like that I'm under capacity. So from the outside and then from the inside. So signs that I'm routinely working under capacity from the outside. So if you were to look at my clinic schedule, you would see, oh, you are seeing like less patients per week. You have less clinic time per week. One way that I do that without sacrificing too much of access offering to patients is that you would see in my schedule, there is about equivalent number of hours and patient slots per week for my patients, but 2 of those days are actually run by nurse practitioners that I've hired privately. But so for myself personally, I have less clinic time and patient-facing time in my weekly schedule. If you looked at like my general schedule, you would see a lot more white space. I am taking on, you know, less clients and really focusing on, even like with my private coaching work, focusing more on groups so that I can have more white space and still, serve as many healthcare humans as I can. But leaving a lot of white space. And I'm still figuring out what to do with that white space, by the way. I'll have white space and I'll be like, do I have a new idea, say, for something I want to create? Do I want to journal? Do I want to do something that's purely fun for me, like a purely pleasurable fun thing? I've restarted playing the ukulele. I kind of learned a while ago, and I've restarted that. I'm actually hoping to get a piano and restart playing the piano. I'm feeling like more desire to be kind of creative, and that because I find that playing music and singing is a very embodied exercise. So it really helps me kind of like feel good in my body. And it just feels good. It feels pleasurable purely for me in a way that's very satisfying. Sometimes on those white space times, I just like rest or nap if I have to. Walking outside a little less these days because it's kind of cold and yucky, but as the weather shifts, I'm hoping to do a lot more walking out in nature. Sometimes I'm like rewatching Ted Lasso because I'm obsessed with the show. Sometimes I'm listening to Taylor Swift podcasts and getting obsessed with, new albums coming out and all the lore. So like I've just like all sorts of things are happening in that white space. And some of them are, you could consider productive or generative, like when I'm, dreaming up a new idea. And a lot of it is generative in just that it's, regenerative for me and my body and just for me. And that feels so good. Also, that white space sometimes gets then taken up by like, an interesting conversation that someone wants to have with me and I have space to do it. If I do get sick, sometimes that white space does get taken up with work, and that's okay because it's like it's flow. It's not a commitment week to week, but it's flow time that I can have. I can decide when to offer a home visit. I can decide when, oh yes, I'm going to move a clinic into this time, and it just feels so good to have that space instead of being like, where am I going to cram this in? That's like a huge one that you would see if you like looked at my calendar, so you could tell from the outside, like, oh, she's less busy than she used to be. Another external sign is that my inboxes are being cleared more routinely, including there was a time a couple of weeks ago where I ran out of things to do at work, which I was like, I have no forms. My inbox is clear. I'm done seeing patients. Interesting. And that's an interesting side effect of this work is every so often you actually nail it and you literally run out of work to do. It's interesting how often that doesn't happen still, even though I'm leaving all this space, but it's nice to know that it is. I think that's a real sign that I'm working under my capacity. It's truly sometimes all the stars align and then there is simply space and you go home early and you go, well, that's lovely. I wrote spending more time with husband and kids. I don't know if temporally I am or not, because, they still work and go to school and that sort of thing. But I feel like I'm spending more present time with them. And it's something I want to continue to grow, but I'm enjoying the time I spend with them. I'm less preoccupied by work. And so I'm really enjoying that. I can selectively pick up and commit to like temporary extra projects. So like at work recently, we moved clinic locations. And there was extra tasks related to that. And earlier in the year, in part because of Francis's illness, and then other times I had other commitments, I actually did elect not to be sort of the main point person for some parts of the planning project. But then other times, like during the move, I had space and time to add in some projects, called some lawyers, whatever, like I had capacity to pick up when something else happened at work, and so it's those things, like you never know when will there be like a staffing crisis at your work, right? And if you already are running full speed and you have no space for it, what are you supposed to do, right? So having space for it means that I've been able to, when I chose to, when it felt right to me, to be kind of the point person in my office, working with office manager and everyone to work on some kind of project, right? And the yeses that I did say yes to got fuller attention. And like, that was so nice. Another thing that I've noticed is that I more frequently run on time with patients. Definitely not all the time, for sure, not all the time still. But I noticed that I really quite frequently flow, sometimes running a little behind, sometimes slightly ahead, but to where I'm often ending within, I would say, 30 minutes of when I'm scheduled to end. And I'd say that's sort of the average routine. It's unusual, and things have happened when I'm running later than that. And I don't have blocks in my schedule. I'm seeing person after person, but I think like when you're more resourced overall and, this is my one half day of the day, or, this is my one day a week where I'm actually seeing patients all day, you can kind of give it a different kind of attention because you know it's not like you can pace yourself accordingly because you know you're going to get time away from it to restore yourself. I have less clutter in my brain because I have space to do all the other tasks. So no, those tasks will get done on that time. I can really just focus on seeing these patients, you know? So yeah, that I'd say those are some of my external signs. Some internal signs that this work is working and I really am working under my capacity these days is it is getting easier to say no. Now that I feel more resourced and have more energy to really like think things through and almost so when someone asks me something, I'm not like so rushed that I just say an automatic yes because I don't have time to think about it. Which I think is what I used to do. I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And then that gave me so much more work. But now it's like, I've already said no to a lot. And so when something new comes in, there's space for me to consider, where do I want to put this? What will that cost me? What will I have to say no to because I'm saying yes to this? And I have space to do that. And therefore also I have space to hold on to myself and metabolize the feelings of guilt or whatever when I do say no. And it has made it feel easier. It's still a challenge. It's still something I always am working on, if you will, or always holding myself through the process of saying no, but it feels more grounded. I also feel like I have more space to actually like get to know who I am as a person with myself and like become my own friend, if you will. And so then I know myself, know it better to be like, Joan, will you actually like doing this? Is this actually what you want to do? And I like have an answer to that. Kind of like what I talked about last week of like knowing what I want. I know what I want more clearly. And there's something that's like, I think of like abundant Joan versus scarcity Joan. So scarcity Joan's like how I used to be so reactive to like I have to do everything everyone says or else everyone's gonna hate me and I'm gonna like end up alone in a corner somewhere, right? Like there's all that scarcity of like there's not enough time, there's not enough goodness. I have to just keep hustling to try and maybe get a little bit of enough. And that ironically meant I was doing so much more and feeling horrible about it and then making mistakes and then doing it all messily, right? But now it's like abundance, like I have enough, I am enough. That's not a static belief I just hold, and it's something I practice, and I practice through leaving space for myself in my day. That's sort of the embodied belief of I am enough is like then giving yourself space in your own life. It's like a way of showing that you know you're enough, you know? And like when I'm feeling that kind of abundance and resource, like I have like more standards, if you will. I know what my full body yes and no is. And so that's something that has been really lovely to discover can happen as I peel away physical things from my agenda, that leaves me space to do that work and to feel so much better about it, you know? An internal sign that I'm under my capacity, one of them is not that I feel no pain or distress. Nope. I definitely feel all the pain, all the distress. One of the things that I think is scariest when people are first considering peeling back work is that they will finally feel feelings they've been running away from. And that definitely happened to me when I first started like getting efficient. I felt so anxious. I actually felt the shame. I felt the guilt that basically overworking it allowed me to run away from. And I still do feel all those feelings, though I will say by, facing them and processing them and metabolizing them, I feel them way less intensely. I can still get into shame spirals or guilt, fogs or whatever, but like they just don't stick as long because and I have like a more, shallow bottom, if you will. Like, my body and I are in such closer connection with each other that she will just tell me like, she'll like tell me stronger, like, okay, I know you're doing like a doom scroll shame spiral, but like, notice how it doesn't actually feel good. And then like kind of call me back to like, what do I actually really need? And I have more space in my schedule to then give my body what she needs. So it's like, oh, my body's just saying she's exhausted. Okay, I'm going to go lie down. Oh, my body, like my body feels like it's full of bees. I'm so anxious about that horrible conversation that I just had with a patient. Okay, well, I know later I'm going to go for a brisk walk. I'm going to make sure I, take time away from screens. I'm going to sing really loud songs on the drive home, like whatever it is. Like I have space to actually do what my body needs to process what's happened. And that's really lovely. I definitely think about work way, way less and I worry way less about everything. It doesn't mean I don't worry, but like the things I worry about are just less intense. And that's very fun. I sort of dream more and imagine more, which is very delightful. Um, I have way more fondness for my patients than I did at the height of my burnout when I really was like not feeling that great about almost any of them and certainly was feeling a lot of resentment in ways that it just felt really not great for me. Even the challenging ones, it's not that I'm like in perfect peace and harmony with every patient. No, because humans are so challenging just in general. We're just like spicy, sticky people for each other. We just bring up all our garbage, right? But like I can find fondness because I have more fondness for, I guess, myself in that room with them, that I then have more fondness for them too. Even the ones where I'm like, wow, they are always going to be that way, huh? Oh boy, that is them through and through. And like, but I just like can acknowledge it more and let them have their story, and I'm over here having my story, and it's actually like more enjoyable, and I can find what's amazing about it of them, which is really cool. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that I actually noticed that my capacity is growing. Like I feel like when I first cut back, it's like more, more, more. I have to cut back more, more, more until I finally like I think my body had to feel safe. Like you really aren't gonna make us overwork ever again, are you? Like, so then it was like even less, sort of restricting almost a little bit. But I noticed that especially if I'm taking it slow, like my capacity is growing. So I like shrunk down how many coaching clients I was having, and I'm slowly growing, but in ways that feel like they aren't going to max me out. I'm thinking and actually planning to add a little bit more clinic time back in and that feels nice. I'm like, it'll be so nice. What if sometimes it doesn't get all the way filled up? Already right now, it's not always getting filled up. Like, wouldn't that be nice to just have space, but to have it there available? And so I'm like thinking of doing that a little bit with no long-term commitment. I can always pare it back again, but like I'm sort of testing the edges, but in a gradual way that feels like I've sort of earned the self-trust of like, if I realize it's too much, I will pare back again. And that feels really nice, just really nice. So, um, talking about how I did it for a minute. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time talking about all the specific ways I did it. I will share some of them at the workshop. And I think through the process, I'm hoping if you come to the workshop, you can share what you've already tried, what has and hasn't worked for you. I want to hear from you how you've tried to do this and then inspire me and inspire each other, like really be sharing things. But here are like, I mean, some of the ways that I've done it. Certainly, like I said already, like I have nurse practitioners who work for me and who are like the best investment of my money that I could imagine, honestly. Just because even for times when I'm sick, then there's spots for patients still to be seen. They cover my inbox on days I'm not there. And there's something about not logging into the EMR at all when I am at home that is just worth every penny, truly. And so that's one way. Putting more and more things, different committees, and that's been really nice. I've talked a bit about using an AI scribe, and that's been still very fun. And as a way I've sort of delegated some of my focus and attention to a computer so then I can even be in more deep focus and connection with patients. And that's been really cool. Training a nurse to do forms for me. That's been a big one. That's been really, really helpful. And it's meant the forms that I do feel way less burdensome. I'm like, so easy. My only form I've done in a couple weeks because I have a nurse practitioner actually the nurse practitioners do some forms too, which is amazing. And then this specific nurse for not just me, but for our office, she's been doing, standard forms, like standard disability forms, all those like immunization forms for like healthcare work. Oh, it's so great to have nurses do it because they're the ones who like keep that all in their brain anyway. So, that's been really wonderful. And what are some other ways? I do a lot of asynchronous patient care. I haven't talked about this a ton on the podcast, but I have this patient portal. I know everyone's got inbox fatigue, but for me, the idea of doing very quick, like, here's your massage note, here's your prescription renewal. Hey, yes, I actually think you do need to come in to see me. Oh, following up on a previous visit and doing it in a way where I'm just doing it in dedicated inbox time and patients having an outlet where they can share a lot with me. And then I can just say, thanks for sharing, and that not needing to be an appointment, but can be in a written form as well. I know a lot of my patients really love it and I really love it. And I think it has really helped me still have overall good access, if you will. Like not that the goal is to, get an A+ in access, but I enjoy finding ways for patients to still um, have their requests or desires for healthcare met in some way when it's appropriate, without me having to add more appointment slots. I'm very interested in that project. And so my patient portal really helps me with that. How else have I done it? I've actually started to do more of that same asynchronous care in coaching. I have like a growing number of like clients where I'm not doing like live one-on-one Zoom sessions, but instead this like asynchronous coaching where they send me a voice memo and I send it back. And that's been really fun. I've enjoyed that very much. It's been some of my drives to and from work. I've been listening and responding back to them. And that's helped me feel I really would love to help as many healthcare humans as want to be helped by me within under my capacity though, right? And so I'm experimenting with ways to do that. I have a social media manager now, so I'm spending way less time on social media. Instead, someone like listens to these podcasts and like turns them into reels and clips for me. And that feels so light. And again, it's just, I'm really enjoying investing some of the money I am earning from coaching back into that so that we can spread the word on these concepts without me having to feel like I'm hustling and doing it all. So all that, again, that's like the external work of how I'm doing this, like some of the small strategies and big strategies of how I've carved away time and space in my schedule. And really, along with all those external actions, like the internal work is basically like everything I talk about on this podcast. So like really recognizing all the inhuman stories and saying, what if the fear of making a mistake did not need to rule my life and time? What if the fear of getting sued did not need to expand my workload? What if the fear that I'm a bad doctor if I don't know all the things and follow all the guidelines and do all the things with patients? Like, what if I walked through that fear and just recognize it for the absolutely impossible, inhuman story that it is, and just stood on the other side and said, I get to decide what patient care looks like for me. I get to decide based on my capacity and my values of what I offer to each patient each day. And that's it, period. And like metabolizing all the emotions that come along with that, giving people back their emotions, their stories, their opinions, like they get theirs, I get mine. Like everything I talk about on this podcast, like the external work is neat and like cool strategies. I love strategies and thinking through like, oh, could this work? Could this work? But it would not be possible if I wasn't also doing this sort of internal work of receiving coaching and coaching myself of like, why do I think that's true? How is that a limiting belief for myself? How is that an inhuman story that's stopping me from just like experiencing my full humanity? And what happens if I do experience my full humanity here, So that's some of the how. So that's just to share. That's where I'm at. That's like some of the how of what I'm doing. So a couple of now that wasn't all like smooth and easy. And so I wanted to share some of the barriers and challenges that I've come up with. Because I'm sure that there's like curiosity, like, but didn't you notice that this, or like, I have this constraint. Doesn't that mean that's not possible for me? Right. So one that people might wonder about is sort of like financial stuff, like how can I afford to hire nurse practitioners? A little bit, I think, I mean, I have to acknowledge financial privilege. I am not the only income earner in my house. The kind of billing, the way that I am paid through the Ontario government, I'm in a FO. That only means something to people from Ontario, but like I'm paid monthly per patient as well as paid a little bit extra for people I see. So my income is not directly related to each patient I see in person, and that makes a big difference. I also do, because I can in collaboration with my husband, I draw a salary that is less than what I bill, and even like what my expenses are. Like I have extra money that I don't draw personally. So, one way to think of it is like, so I pay myself under my financial capacity, right? So that helps for sure, that I don't need every penny that I earn. And so therefore there was money left over to hire staff and to pay staff. And the thing over time I noticed is like investing in that means then more money ends up coming back to me because I can find interesting ways to make income in other ways, including this whole coaching venture that I'm on, right? So that's one kind of barrier that people might experience. And that's how I have navigated that barrier of like where to find money for some of these things. Another one that's come up is some patients telling me it's more like an in the moment thing where it's like, oh no, I've done this big shift in my practice. I've done this big shift in my schedule. And now patients are like, oh, it's so much harder to get an appointment with you. And some patients are like, oh, I thought I was going to see you and I saw the nurse practitioner instead, and like noticing like that I felt guilty about that or anxious about that. And so, that could be, I could use that as data of like, see, this project isn't working. Won't, patients hate it, canceled. But when I stepped back, I noticed a couple things. So first of all, I also wanted to give credit to the fact that there were lots of other patients who did not notice at all and kept seeing me and were fine with it. There were lots of patients who were like, I love that nurse practitioner. She's so great. And so like some people really loved having sort of variety and different people involved in their care. So need to give credit for that. I also used my memory to think back to the times when I was offering personally like 8 half days of clinic per week and how people still then said to me, I can't get an appointment with you because you don't work on Mondays. Like literally, no matter what my schedule looks like, there will be some patients where it doesn't fit their schedule, or at least their expectations of when they think I should be available. I couldn't see you that same day. I couldn't see you that same morning. Like there's going to be times when patients will be unhappy with my availability. And so at least shifting to a schedule where I'm happy with my availability, that's good to notice, right? And so, and the other thing actually, as I was preparing the outline for this podcast, I got curious. I've been meaning to do this for a while. So I went and looked at this thing that we have in like when you're in the funding model I'm in Ontario, there's this thing called an access bonus where I get a certain amount of money and then I get docked pay out of that amount of money if my patients go and see other doctors for care I could have provided. So if they go to walk-in clinics, a lot of times for things like they're like in the hospital and there's a certain fee code and still I get docked for that. So whatever. But so because of that, like I get a report of my patients who were seen by other people instead of me. And I was curious because like you'd think, oh gosh, I've cut my access back so much, like probably way more of my patients are seeing walk-in clinics, which honestly, even if they were, I would not have a problem with. I'd be like, so happy you're receiving care. But I looked and like the number of patients that are seeing walk-in clinics is less in 2023 than it was in 2019 when I was not hiring any nurse practitioners. I was working a lot more. And that's pre-pandemic. So it wasn't even all the like stresses of the pandemic. I was that busy and seeing that many patients, and my access was like the number of patients seeing other doctors and going to walk-in clinics was way higher. I was actually surprised. I thought it would be the same or worse, and it was better. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So just like fact checking. So like when people say, I can never see you, like not having that be a reason to then switch. It's important to hear feedback from patients, of course, but like I got to make sure I'm actually getting accurate feedback from them versus just anecdotally remembering the worst comments I hear. Another thing that I'm really experimenting with is how I'm going to put in quotes like market to my patients, as in like provide them repeated information about how they could access care. This is something I've really learned from sort of this whole coaching business stuff of like part of marketing is reminding people over and over again of like, hey, here's how you can find my podcast. Hey, this is how you could coach with me if you wanted. Like even people think like you put it on your website and then everyone should know, but like everyone is busy, everyone is distracted, nobody knows. And what if that was true for our patients as well? So like, yes, we have a clinic website. Yes, it says our hours, etc. But I've been experimenting with how I could market even more to patients. So something I've done over the past few years is host like a Zoom webinar that I call my like patient town hall, where I invite patients to come and I share with them like an update on the office. And the thing I've included each time is like, here's a reminder of how you can access care from me. And I talk about my patient portal, I talk about online booking, I talk about after hours clinic, and then I talk about my hours. Last year, I talked about how my hours were changing, and I didn't share the details of why, but I shared that my husband had a serious medical diagnosis, which meant I needed more time for my family. And therefore, this is why you'll actually see here are the hours, and some of those hours will be covered by these awesome nurse practitioners. I was really trying to like sell it. So I'm going to do that again this year. Actually later today, I'm going to be doing my next like patient town hall and being like, hey, here's what the hours are now. Reminder that these amazing nurse practitioners are here for you and they're so amazing, and kind of like marketing to them, and saying, here's like, I think you don't know the different ways that you could have an appointment, whether it's with me or someone else. You don't know maybe that you could ask me this question on patient portal. So like reminder again, because people need to hear things like in the marketing world, I hear a lot like people need to hear things on average 7 times before they actually like digest the message. That's like Taylor Swift. She's everywhere. She's on all the news things. She wants to make sure every single person on the planet knows that she's got a new album coming out or whatever. Like you have to repeat yourself a lot and really say it a lot for it to sink in. And I don't want to repeat it with every patient, every visit. So how could I do it? I could put posters up, town hall. I'm going to experiment with sending out like an email newsletter using, something like MailChimp with patients to see if that's a way that feels nice for them to receive information. And I can put little like health tips or wellness tips in there. So I'm thinking about doing stuff like that, and just see if that helps. It won't help everyone because not everyone's paying attention, but like if it helps overall, just continue to spread the message of like, here are ways that you can get care. Here's the whole team of how you can get care. And if that will help sort of address the concern that's coming up when some patients say like, I can't get in to see you. So we'll see. I'll keep reporting back if those continue to help or not. Another challenge that's come up, sharing my practice with other healthcare humans in this like more direct way, is noticing. So when one of the nurse practitioners is covering my inbox on one day versus me, we each have different styles, which actually I think is a good thing. I've learned a ton from them, and like, their knowledge of certain diseases or certain guidelines has been really helpful for me just to have an understanding of like what's even out there. I've heard about drugs from them that I hadn't heard of before. Like it's been really great. But of course, say we're all trying to co-manage one patient who's having a lot of workup. We were noticing some confusion, like you're looking through the chart, you're spending a lot of time scrolling, like when would they last seen? And so one thing that we've done that I think has been really essential is every like 1 to 2 weeks, we have a 30-minute Zoom huddle, like over lunchtime. And we just talk over like what's like any like pain points, patient cases, what's been challenging. And especially at first, I think that was so important just to like, first of all, foster a sense of connection between the three of us. We knew each other already, but it's like, here we are, we're on a team together, and like develop that as a culture of it's okay to say if you're uncomfortable with something. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to share that you don't know things, right? So like that's been really good. And then we've developed ways. So like, we have a certain way that we write in a patient chart if there's like an active workup, so that we can be kind of working off of each other's notes and be seeing it a bit more clearly. And I just have been finding that those have been really helpful. And like I said, like kind of free CME, like really good learning for me, honestly, and hopefully for them as well. So those were some like kind of external challenges and barriers, and how I've addressed them so far. Some internal challenges and barriers. So one for sure is like, I was surprised at how intense the guilt was the first time I like drove home at noon on a usual clinic day. And so, I just had to feel all those feelings. I had to say, well, there's my socialization coming up saying like, I'm only worthy if I worked myself to the bone. But what if I didn't? What if I am just trying this as an experiment? And continuing to do that means I feel way less guilty. It feels just like a relief and natural and supportive and lovely. So if guilt is preventing you from trying this, know that on the other side, it doesn't stay that intense the whole time. You can metabolize it, you can process it and feel it all the way through. And you'll have to probably do that for a while, but less and less intensely. And it's so worth it because on the other side, like I'll have flickers of it, but also then I just see the benefit overall and how it hasn't totally destroyed the world or my practice. And I'm like, look, everyone's okay. And that's been feeling like so good. Another thing I've noticed almost more recently is like feeling different than my colleagues. And like just only in my mind, I have literally heard no judgmental comments, but I can imagine that those would happen, and maybe they're happening behind my back, who knows? But like, I would just spend a lot of time worrying that they were thinking like, wow, I thought she was a good family doctor or a real family doctor, but clearly she's only part-time. We put in quotes. What does that even mean? She's lazy. She doesn't care about her patients anymore. She's just too distracted by other things. Like, I have all these things that are clearly just my own internalized judgments that I then get to release. And then feeling different from other people in my office who have different schedules, who are working at schedules for their reasons, right? And I address that by acknowledging, actually, these are all my internalized judgments, metabolizing the emotions, feeling them all the way through, and doing that kind of belonging work, like I talked about a couple podcasts ago, of like offering myself belonging and not othering myself, and noticing that then allows me to feel more connected and belonging with them, even though we are practicing in different styles. So that's been something really interesting to notice that came up, and that's how I've been working on it and practicing addressing it. And then the last one I am still definitely working on, which is sort of like a restlessness and excitement to add more stuff in. So I'll like have free space, and like part of my brain's like, ooh, what could we fill it with? Could we do this project? Could we do that thing? Could we take this course? And I have succumbed to doing some of those things for sure. And so I do try and just that's why this like pleasure activism I'm doing this year, of like filling some of that space with something, but that isn't like a commitment. It's just like, I'm learning ukulele again, like things that are just for me. That's helped, because I just think my body likes doing things. Okay. I like, not sitting completely still for an entire day. Maybe I'll someday do that in some kind of meditation retreat, but for now, it is helpful for me to have something to almost distract myself with, and to do instead of committing to 50 billion things and feeling overwhelmed. And then the other thing I do is, so if I'm getting invitations, I try and wait at least 24 hours before saying yes to something new, and like really checking in with my body first to be like, body, what do you think? Imagine me and you, body, doing that thing, every Thursday afternoon for the next year. How's that going to feel? What's that going to take away with? So like really spending that time and like giving myself space to consider, instead of immediately wanting to be like, yes, yes, yes to everything. Because things are exciting. Beautiful things are happening. I'm getting lots of invitations to do different things, which is so wonderful. But like, if I do it all, then I will be back over my capacity. And that is just an essential core practice that I don't want to give up anytime soon. I'm feeling like it's kind of I want it to be my new normal, probably forever. Whether it's officially 75%, who can say, but like just being under my capacity, doing less, is just feeling too good to give up. So just to say, the reason I included those is just as a reminder, like any barrier is actually just an obstacle. So if you're like, I could never do this because, and like whatever comes to your mind, if you list those out, those are not necessarily things that have to be actual barriers forever. Those are things that are obstacles to be overcome, both internally by noticing, the inhuman stories and limiting beliefs within those statements, as well as coming up with strategies. Okay, so like your office manager is always pressuring you to work more, but you want to work less. That's not actually a barrier to working less. That's something to create internal and external strategies around. And there are always a million options of how to actually address that, right? Okay, so that's my update. That's my checkup with myself and with you. Have I enticed you to consider checking up with your own capacity? How's it feeling these days? Are you like 150% over? Are you at 100 and that's like, wow, I'm only at 100? Or are you under? Like, how's it going? Have you already, from like going to past workshops or listening to past podcasts, I really started to imagine like, what could it look like? What could I subtract? What could I take off my plate so that there's more space for me? I hope so. That's the whole point of this. So it's okay if it hasn't, but like, what if it did? Right. And so along with that, if you're like, okay, I'd love to spend a little bit of time and really get more practical support and tips and community around just even knowing there are other healthcare humans doing this. And this is like a project that if you're inspired by it, could be a project well worth continuing to do for yourself. So I encourage you then to come to the free workshop. You could register. I'm going to have the recording up for, I think, just 30 days after, because, they'll be sharing, and I want to honor people's privacy by not having it up on the internet forever. But like, if you think that you could either come on Wednesday, March 6th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, it's going to go run for about 90 minutes. If you think you can come live, that would be amazing, because then you can get like real-time support, and maybe I'll even coach you if you want. Like you can share some of your dilemmas, and we can all work through it together, right? Or if you want to watch the recording afterwards, please, I would love for you to come. I've decided to do one for free, just because I want as many people as want to start to engage with this idea. I think it's a really important idea. I have a dream of really shifting healthcare culture so that we really start honoring and noticing and asking each other about capacity. I think it's something that could be kind of a game changer if we did it. So this is me. Transparency, I'm trying to influence healthcare culture by inviting you to a workshop. But if you want to be a part of that, like, come along. It would be so fun. Yeah, it's going to be, just so you know a bit about it, it's going to be 90 minutes together on Zoom. You can turn off your camera if you're shy. I'm going to lead you through sort of a reflection process where you can, you'll be writing down for yourself and reflecting on, what could I be paring away? What could I be delegating to actually create some room and space? And how can I honor my capacity in doing that? Right. And then I hope lots of time for kind of Q&A, idea sharing, coaching type support, very, very like non-confrontational, just very supportive and strategy generating. I hope lots of people will have ideas to share with each other. Yeah, my goal is, like, if you come to this workshop or watch after, like, if you could have one incredibly tangible and accessible next step that you're like, this is possible, I can do this tomorrow, I will, it feels a little scary, but I will. And you actually start to then shift yourself and orient your work towards honoring your capacity, I'll be like, yes, we did it. So that's my intention with the workshop, and I would love for you to be there. You can go to my website. If you go look under workshops, it'll direct you to where to sign up. If in the show notes, it will also direct you where you can sign up. And yeah, I would love to see you there. And if you can't make it, you don't want to prioritize it, that's totally fine. For those of you, then I will talk to you next week. Bye.